Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PhotoBiz Live. This is Andy from the PhotoBiz team, and today we're joined by Brett Jarnagin, and today he's going to do a presentation about the Lightroom Retouching Toolkit. Just a reminder, in addition to learning from Brett today, we are going to feature a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. You can submit your questions using the chat tool, and we'll get to them after the presentation. Just as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time during the presentation, so if you think of a question, go ahead and ask it. That way you don't forget it and we can get to it near the end. If you have any difficulty hearing the speaker or seeing the slides, please let me know. We will do what we can, but as an additional reminder, we do record these webinars and we will make it available for replay on YouTube. They're going to be on the PhotoBiz YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/PhotoBiz. With that out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Brett and let him take it away.
Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for joining me today for this Lightroom Retouching Toolkit webinar. This is something I've been working on for quite some time now, and I'm excited to have the platform to get to show you what it does and how it can be beneficial to your workflow. If you're a user already, thank you so much. This has been an insane ride. I did a webinar for PhotoBiz when I first launched the beta release, and we did 100 sets released, and we sold those out in like 3 days. I decided to make it its own brand and give it its own website, and so we launched that back in January, and the response has honestly been overwhelming. I'm about to have a heart attack sitting here talking to you guys right now because this has just been insane. The response has been great. And when you create something like this, all you really want is for people to like it and for them to find a place for it in their workflow so they can speed up their workflow and save them time. So if you have it, you're going to get a lot more insight into the brushes and how you can get the most out of them. If you don't have it yet, you're going to find out a lot more about it, and I'm certainly going to try to include plenty of Lightroom tips so you can get the most out of Lightroom in general, as well as your brushes and some other little tricks. So I'm going to try to go slow. I have a tendency to speed through these things. I've had the flu for the past week, so now that I have every excuse out of the way, we'll get started. I always feel weird teaching a webinar because I really feed off of smiling faces. By the way, here is me. This is what I look like. This is on the way to WPPI. And I have a picture of you guys. It's a really wide-angle picture, but I didn't want to feel completely alone sitting here talking. So if you were in Asia, I missed you. Sorry. But I'm assuming you're all sending me positive energy so I can get through this and do the best by you guys. I appreciate your time, and we'll go ahead and get started. So first things first, I'm going to show you one of my favorite little tricks for Lightroom, how to get the most out of your color. And just a really brief background about me, if you don't know who I am from Adam, I started my photography business at age 19. I've been lucky enough to get to teach all over the world, even though I've taught photography in a different language in a different country. Webinars make me more nervous than that. But I've got to teach all over the place, and I created Life Camera Actions, which is a Photoshop action company. I created that in 2010, and ever since, people ask me to make presets, and I had Lightroom too, and like so many people I've talked to at trade shows, you'll have to forgive me if I mute it, it's because I'm coughing up alone. Like so many people I've talked to at trade shows, Lightroom just sat on my computer, and I didn't use it. I didn't really like the program. I think I had Lightroom 2 at the time, and it just wasn't robust enough. And when they came out with Lightroom 4 and Lightroom 5, they made some huge improvements, enough so that I've actually switched my entire workflow over to Lightroom, and we're going to get into the retouching toolkit, which is what allows me to keep my entire workflow within Lightroom. But first off, I just want to talk about some import things. When you bring a picture into Photoshop, your camera calibration is automatically going to change the profile to Adobe Standard. So where I'm at right now is I'm in the Develop module, and I'm in the very bottom of this right-hand side underneath Camera Calibration. So one quick trick I want to give you, regardless of whether you're an LRT user or not, is you can come down here and actually change this profile, and you'll notice immediately the change in the color. So there's standard, which is automatically applied, and then here is landscape, which is what I personally like to use the most. And you'll notice a big difference in the color. So another thing I like to do is go in here and raise the saturation of the blues at the bottom to maybe 12 or 14. That increases the color even more. And I'll take the reds down about an equal amount, so about, we'll just say 13. And that's going to reduce the redness in the skin and not really have much of an impact on other parts of the photo. So another thing I like to do upon import is come in here to Effects and increase the amount, actually decrease, my apologies, of our post-crop vignette, and that's just going to draw the eye in a little bit towards our subject. So here is just the split view of the before and after. You can see our original and then our after, and it's such a simple thing to change down here, but it's such a big difference in the end, and I really like to start out with the image that way. So if you want to set this up, this is your, I guess these are all freebies today since this is a free webinar. I can at least guarantee you'll get your money's worth. But if you'd like to set this up on import, we can save this as a preset, and you'll click over here, if you can see presets, the little plus sign, and if you want to snap a screenshot of this right here, you can see exactly what I'm saving on here. I'm saving our post-crop vignetting, which we added, our process version calibration, also vibrance, which is one other thing I wanted to talk about. I like to increase the vibrance as well, up to, I don't know, we'll say 7. And that's just going to increase the color a little bit more. So these things added together are going to give you something that looks almost like a finished image to begin with. So again, we'll click plus. I call this, we got a train, wonderful. I call this one Auto Magic, and I'm going to create that. I've already created it. And then when you import, so you go to Library and import down here in the bottom left. It brings up this import screen, and on Develop Settings you can now go to User Presets and Auto Magic, and that'll automatically apply to your images when you import them. Now you'll want to make sure that you like the way that looks on your photos. You may shoot differently than I do. Your colors may come out differently. You may like a different one of those settings. But this is a way you can apply any one of your presets upon import. You can also change your metadata, so you can include your name, your copyright, all that kind of stuff, and also keywords which show up. Google uses those keywords in search, so I may want to put Brett Jarnagin, wedding photos, epic sky, or describe the photo, and that way I can find that image in Lightroom, and Google can find it easier as well. So there's your little freebie in case you don't have the retoucher. But now I am going to get into the retoucher, which is 48 adjustment brushes for Lightroom 4 and 5. It lets you smooth skin, enhance eyes, whiten teeth, reduce redness, so much more. When I started using Lightroom, the biggest problem was I had to go into Photoshop to do all my retouching, and that's just a huge waste of time for me. I don't want to be jumping back and forth between programs. So I developed this retoucher, and it has really now we got semis across the street. Wonderful. I live across from like a meat market, so we've got some afternoon hustle and bustle going on. So the retoucher, you're going to find it up here in your adjustment brush panel. You can get there by clicking up in this corner on this icon or pressing K. That's the hotkey that'll get you there. And again, it's 48 brushes, and this is the list right here. So I've worked really hard to keep things organized and easy to find, because brushes in Lightroom are automatically listed alphabetically. So I've tried to keep these in a very organized, easy to find setup here. So you see it all starts with LRT, which is going to keep all of our brushes grouped together in your list, so you don't have to jump around if you have other brushes. And then they're separated into adjustments, our beauty brushes for skin smoothing. We've got eyeshadow, brushes for the eyes, lips, skin, teeth, etc. So they're pretty easy to find. These brushes up here you're going to have regardless of whether you have our retoucher or not. These come standard in Lightroom. Here I'm using Lightroom 5, so these brushes may look a little different if you're in a different program. So I'm always going to start out with either our brighten or darken brush. If the image is already balanced, like this one is, I'm just going to jump straight to our beauty brush. So we click that. And then to change the size of your brush, you're just going to use your brackets key. Okay, so left and right brackets will change your brush size. So I like to keep my right hand on the mouse, left hand on the keyboard. It's going to allow me to edit a little bit faster. Another thing to note down here is your flow and your density. If your flow is below like 70%, you're not going to see much of an effect on your image. So I like to just keep that at 100 by default, especially when you're getting started out with brushes, so you see what's going on. Your density is the density that the brush is going to apply with. And because in Lightroom we don't have access to layer masks and easily changing the opacity, our density and our flow are what we're going to use to make those adjustments. So for now, I'm going to start out with both at 100%, and all I'm going to do is paint this off the skin, or paint this on the skin actually. And you'll see that's going to smooth out the skin. It's going to still make it look natural. You can be pretty quick with it. If you ever need to see where you've painted on the skin, you can press O, and then that will show you that you're actually pretty terrible at staining the lines. You can toggle through this color as well by pressing, I think, Shift and O. Nope, undo that.
Hey, Brett.
And no, maybe.
Brett, if I could interrupt you for just a second. We have a request here. If possible, can you expand the left and right menus so that the viewers can get a little bit better view of what you're clicking on?
I don't think I can, just because of the way this webinar is set up. I can't zoom into those any, unfortunately. But I would recommend a magnifying glass, perhaps. I'm not really sure. Maybe you can zoom in on your actual, if you're watching from at home, if you press Command and plus, maybe you can zoom in some. I'm really not sure what else I can do.
That would work, and if you're on a PC, that's going to be Control and plus. Thanks for that.
Okay, sorry guys. Wish I could zoom in a little bit more. But I will tell you this much though, this stuff on the side, you're not going to have to adjust very much, if ever. And that I'm talking about with the brushes and the preset brushes that come with the Lightroom Retouching Toolkit. It's pretty rare that you're going to have to make changes, and if I do make any sort of changes to those, I'll be sure to clarify exactly what I'm doing so you guys can follow along. So right now I'm still on the beauty brush. I'm going to smooth out her chest as well, just because we can, and her arms too, because I want my subjects to look consistent, and that's going to help make sure all of her skin looks consistent. If you want to, there's 3 different settings on the beauty brush. We have the standard, which is what I use most often. We have a strong setting above that, and natural as well. So if you want to change the strength, all you have to do is just change the actual brush after you've painted it on. And it's automatically going to change over. So here I'm going from our standard beauty brush to the strong beauty brush, and you can see it smooths out the skin even more. So that way you have some options, and you can really dial it in to look the way you want it. Now anytime I'm going to pick a new brush, I have to click New right here in this right panel, our adjustment brush panel, and then I'm going to select from the drop-down menu the brush I want. Now these are all named for what they do, so it's not like a scavenger hunt. You don't have to try and find exactly what, you know, super fun, happy skin pop does or figured out. It's just going to be named what it is. So here she's got some redness on her chest in this area here. So I want to go to Skin, Reduced Redness Plus. We have that in 2 different strengths. And I'm just going to paint that off the area that's red. That's great for like baby photos, for seniors. Almost everybody has some redness in their skin. And if you're going to run some presets on that, chances are that redness is going to get made even more exaggerated. So reducing that redness with our brushes really helps. So here's our before and after, and we've only even messed with 2 different brushes. We used the beauty brush and the skin smoothing. So I'm going to zoom in here on her eyes. We also have brushes for each eye color. So I'll go in here to eyes and blue. And all you have to do is paint this right over the pupils. It's going to sharpen, brighten, and add a little bit of color to the eyes. So here's the before and after there. Okay, and we can even smooth the lips if we feel like they're too cracked, or we can apply our lip gloss if we want to add a little bit more pink to the lips. And everything in here is just about really subtle retouching. I want my subjects to look real. I don't want them to look like a fake version of who they are. I want them to look like the best version of who they are. So all these brushes in here are meant to give you realistic retouching really quickly and simply. So we'll move on to another image. Oh, by the way, this image is from Brittany Gardner, and she owns, my elbow actually rubbed away her business name, but it's called Turn Loose the Art, and she also owns Willow Album Designs, so check her out. She's awesome. She wrote a review for us on Fundy, and we had sales in like 18 countries in a few days, so she's one of my favorite people ever. So, and we also, another thing that's really cool that we do is I'm donating 5% of all of our online sales to Operation Smile, and yesterday was a really awesome day because we actually got to cut the first checks, and we saved 3 kids of smiles, which means there's 3 kids that are going to be able to get reconstructive surgery for cleft palate or cleft lip. So I want to publicly thank Brittany for that article she wrote, Fundy and their team for posting it on their blog. If you've not seen his new album builder yet, you need to check it out because it's actually a revolutionary product. And also Vanessa Joy, who did a lot to tell people about the retoucher. So thank you guys so much. You've literally helped put the smile on the face of some kids, and all you guys that bought it too. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Going on to this next image, I always want to start out by balancing out my subject. So here, she's kind of dark, so I'm going to come in here to a new brush, and I'm going to select Brighten, which is right at the top of the list because this is something that you're going to need to do on a lot of your images. Just based on the way the light falls on the subject, there's going to be times where their face is brighter, maybe their arms are darker. Still, her arm is darker than her face. So I'm going to click New and Brighten once again to just double up on that layer and add a new layer of brightness. Now you guys will notice, if you've ever used brushes, oh, my computer loves me right now. If you guys have ever used brushes, you'll notice that, or you will show where you've edited. And I've turned those off down here by Show Edit Pins and click Never. But if you need to see where these are at, you can click right here in the Show Edit Pin. You can turn that on Always or Never or Auto. And I think my computer's coming back to me. There we go. Cool. So if I turn this on Auto, you'll be able to see these pins, and these show you exactly where you've brushed. So this was my brightening of the left arm, and then this pin right here shows the brightening of her entire face. Now why that matters is if we went back and we wanted to brighten up that entire pin, we can make an adjustment of each brush. So I've selected this pin right here, which was the whole, basically her whole face. I could come over here and turn up the exposure even more if I chose to. So again, you have total control over your entire image and the final product. We just have tried to make it as easy as possible for you to get the results you want without having to make too many adjustments to the settings. So once I've balanced that out, I'm going to go through with my beauty brush once again This is really going to be a staple of your workflow. I mean, this brush itself I think is worth the price of this tool because it smooths out the skin. It's going to work for about 95% of your retouching, and it looks really, really good. You can use it on any part of the skin, whether it's the arms, the face, or anything else that needs smoothed out for that matter. And my assistant, who I've had messing with the retoucher quite a bit, says that it works really good for removing wrinkles from clothing too. So we're always finding new ways to use this stuff. Spray tan is another one that's under skin, and it's pretty nice for balancing out areas like this where this almost looks like she might have been spray tanned on her hands anyway, and the bottom of her hand isn't quite blended as well. So I'm just going to use that spray tan on these parts of her hand that look a little bit light, just to balance them out. So so far, here's our before and after. She kind of has bags under her eyes as well, so I've made a brush called Remove Bags. Again, everything is named exactly what it does. And we're just going to paint this right off underneath the eyes. It's going to brighten and blend. And it's a lot easier than the old way of trying to use the clone tool or the heal tool to try and sample from that area. So you can always add a second layer of that, but we still want to try and maintain the orb-like nature of the eyes, I guess you could say. So let's go in here. And guys, this stuff is really just kind of fun to play with. I've mostly just been spreading the word about it, so I haven't got to do a lot of editing, but it makes this so much easier to just go in here and do this and add different layers and to look at the image and say, what is it that I want to change? And right now her eyes are a little bit darker than I would like, so I'm going to go to Eyes and Bright Eyes. Bright Eyes is a brush I use when there's not a lot of light in the eyes. It's going to go ahead and brighten them up and sharpen as well. So you just paint that over the pupils, and there we go. So here's our before and after. We didn't even have to run any presets or any kind of effect. All we did was mess with the brushes. And I wouldn't normally spend more than 60 to 90 seconds retouching an image. I'm going a little bit more in depth here for you guys today, but typically I'm going to go through these pretty quick. This one, by the way, was from Jessica Edwards, so thank you, Jessica, for letting us use your picture. It's lovely. Here's another image. This one is mine. And with this shot, I really had to underexpose a little bit because if I exposed for her skin, the dress was going to get blown out. So this is an instance where I'm going to go in with the brushes to actually brighten up locally as opposed to making an overall adjustment. So again, you're going to see that a lot of these same brushes get used over and over. I have some different images and effects we're going to apply as well. But the staples of your workflow are always going to be the same. I mean, even when I did live camera actions, we would have people tell me their different favorite brushes, you know, and it would always surprise me what was everyone's favorite. But it's always going to come down to, you know, 5 or 10 things that you use the most because they work best for your workflow. So I'm going to brighten up the truck, and I might brighten up back here too so we get a little bit more of the green. But even just running those these dodge and burn brushes can be a big help. So I'm going to add another brush. Trying to slow down a little bit. Another thing I like to do when I retouch is really kind of focus in on the eyes and the way the light values fall on somebody's face. So I'm going to make this brush really small so I can point this out. See on her nose here, it's brighter. It's a little bit brighter here. It's a little bit brighter up here. Around her eyes, it gets to be a little bit darker. We kind of have this circle right here, and this side is a little bit darker. One thing that I've always tried to do, and this is that's a little bit too bright, so I'm going to undo, which is Apple Z. And if I need to change the brightness of a brush as I apply it, I can change the density or I can change the flow. Now, personally, I like to change the density most of the time. I'm going to go down to 80%. So that's basically the opacity of that brush. And I'm just painting this with a very feathered brush. Feathered meaning the softness around the brush, and that can be changed right over here. But I have mine up all the way to 100%, which means it's going to gradient out from brightest to darkest, so to strongest effect to no effect. And that's going to let me make changes without being obvious about the changes I'm making. Okay, so I've painted in these two areas here, and if I press O, you're going to be able to see exactly where I painted. And then I kind of want to brighten up her cheek here, but if I were to paint that right now at the same strength, I've made it a little bit brighter than the area, and my goal was to balance it out. So I'm going to lower my density even more. I'm going to go down to like 42%, and I'm just going to very lightly paint this over. Now, one thing to note, if I paint back over an area that I've already painted with a stronger density, it's going to change the density to whatever I've changed it to. So I went from 80, I think, to 42, and then when I painted back over her eye, it actually lowered the density. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to 80 and paint that back in. I'm also going to try and balance out a few other areas of the shot. And again, if I start out and it looks too bright from the get-go, I'm just going to press Apple Z to undo, and then I'm going to change either my flow or my density. It's up to you. Now, if I change the flow, I really don't want to go below 80, because then it doesn't do much of anything after you get below 70 or 80. But what the flow allows you to do is continuously apply. So whereas density is only going to go to a set density, the flow is going to gradually apply more and more and more, as if you were working with a paintbrush and watercolors, and you started out with just a little bit, and then you painted more on top of that and more on top of that. Okay? So we've done the beauty brush enough, so we'll move on to one image here. Now this is my little cousin, and he had a little bit of baby acne. So we could use the beauty brush to get rid of this, but what I'm actually going to opt to do, let me get zoomed in on him here. I don't have a whole lot of kid pictures, so don't be picky. We're going to go to spot removal, because this is built into Lightroom 4 and 5. It's right up here in your develop module. You can press Q to get to this, and you have two options, heal and clone. And I actually prefer to use the heal tool to come in here for blemishes like this and just click on the area that I want to fix. I'm going to undo that actually. I'm going to just hit delete to get rid of that, because I want to make the brush a little bit smaller. But I'm going to paint that over the area, and with heal, it's automatically going to pick the area that it, meaning Lightroom, it's going to pick the area it feels is best to replace that area with, and it's going to try to blend it. So as I move this selector around, you're going to see it change the skin, and all I'm doing is looking for the best spot to replace this with. Okay, and half the time Lightroom's going to do a great job, and half the time it's not, and you're going to need to move it around. And just look at, I'm not looking at where I'm moving as much as I'm looking at this area here to make sure it blends in. Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit quicker. Looks good. Now the reason I'm doing this instead of the brush is because anytime you have big blemishes, this tool was designed by Adobe to remove blemishes. So the quality that it's going to leave on taking out a big blemish is a lot better, because the way our brushes work to a small extent is blurring and reducing the clarity and raising a few other things. So if you're taking out a big blemish, I always recommend using the clone tool, just because that's what it's there for, and the best quality of photograph is the whole point. So once we've done that, then I'm going to come in here and use our beauty brush to further smooth out these areas And I'm also going to make sure I change my density and my flow to 100% so they really have the necessary effect. Okay? So his eyes are also a little bit dark. So I'll hit New and Bright Eyes once again and just paint this right over the eyes. I'm also going to try to do one other thing, which I'm probably setting myself up for failure, but if you ever need to remove stray hairs or like this blade of grass right here, let's really test the clone and heal tool here. I'm going to adjust my brush size again with the bracket tool. Now, if you're looking here at my tool, let me put it somewhere it's easy to see. You'll see an inner circle, and then there's another outer circle. Now that inner circle, anything that's inside of that is going to be the strongest the brush or the effect is going to be. And that outer circle is symbolic of where it's going to start to fade and gradient out to a lesser effect. Okay, so I really want this inner circle to cover that entire spot. And so again, Photoshop or Lightroom rather is picking what it feels is the best bet to replace and fix this area and blend it in. And it's doing a pretty crappy job thus far. I mean, I could somewhat live with that, but I'm going to switch over to clone and see if we can get this better. And it's not looking good. So I'm going to stick with heal, and I'm going to do. See, this is live, people. This is not scripted. Things go wrong. It's part of the show. So I'm going to come down here and actually make a second layer. And as you see, if I go over this, it's going to select that. So you can either click Done and start a new one, or just come from the very edge and then paint over. So by doing this twice, good Lord, no wonder why people have problems with this. It really does take some fine-tuning to get this thing to work. And by the way, Lightroom made this, not me. My stuff actually is pretty simple to use. But I think that's about the best we could get that. I'll hit Done. And then we could come in here with maybe one of the beauty brushes. We'll go strong and just kind of blend this arm in some. Is that perfect? No. But is it better than what it was? Yeah, substantially. So here's the before and after, just done really quick in Lightroom. I kind of feel like Bob Ross, the slower I talk. And that might not register with some of our younger users. Let's hop over to another image. This one's from Clay Cook, who's an exceptional photographer. This image here, he sent over sort of like a setup shot and gives us a lot of opportunities to correct some things. So anytime I'm editing, I'm always looking at the image and assessing what could be better and how I can fix it. So I'm going to adjust this one all with the brushes. Come up here and select, let's go with spray tan actually. So it's under skin, spray tan, and you'll notice her chest is really, really white. So I'm just going to paint this spray tan over these white areas, a little bit over her hands, and her chest is still kind of white, so I'm going to hit New and double up on that layer. And there we go. We kind of balance that out a little bit. If you want to add it to another area but lower, I'm going to go with the flow. Go with the flow and lower that to like 50% just to kind of paint this over the hands. So now we're ready to brighten up her outfit. As you'll notice, especially with that discrepancy we had of how bright her chest is to how dark her jacket is, that's where these local adjustments come in handy, because we can go in and make an adjustment in one area and balance out the image as opposed to the entire image, which typically is going to make that bright spot brighter and that dark spot darker. Okay, so there's that. And then again, just your simple brighten brush, and you have an exposure brush built into Photoshop. So Lightroom. Flu medicine's killing my brain. But you do have an exposure brush built in to Lightroom. So I'm going to go ahead and just use that in case you don't have the retoucher. You can learn how to use this a little bit. So it defaults to plus 0.42. I'm painting this over the eyes and these dark parts just like I did on the image before. And that's really how I start. It's not that I rarely ever paint over an entire face. I more just try to fill in the shadowed areas. So that didn't have a ton of effect. So I'm going to raise the shadows a little bit and the exposure, because really all I'm messing with are those two things. And then you can continue to do that with your exposure brush. I'm just going to jump back down to brighten because we've already included a change for the shadows. So this just works a little bit more consistently with your images. Okay, and once again we can use one of our eye adjustment brushes. I'm going to use the Blue Eyes brush. Again, you'll notice it brightens and sharpens. And we have brushes for the hair as well. So my wife's actually a hair and makeup artist. I've taken her on the road with me and I've done tours and things like that. So I've got a lot more insight into hair and makeup than I think most dudes probably have. Now one mistake I think I might have made, let me see. Oh, never mind. I don't make mistakes. Just kidding. I make them all the time. So that was called the finishing spray, which I kind of did not explain very well because I was having an ADD moment. But I'm coming back here to hair. It's called finishing spray. That's actually a real product women use on their hair. But what it does is it adds a little bit more contrast into the hair and makes it look more three-dimensional. So it really matches in with the photo that we're working on. We could also, again, the thing I really want to emphasize is that if you want to get good portraits or good pictures in general or good editing, the best way to approach any of this stuff is to look at the picture and assess what could be better and how you can do it. So I've taught off-camera flash all over the world. The main thing we want to do is just show people, look at that image and just look at it as what can be better and make the improvement. So that's all I'm doing here is I'm just looking. I think her skin could be a little bit smoother. Her lip could probably be a little bit brighter. I could probably brighten up her teeth as well. So again, just that brighten brush is super, super valuable to anybody using Lightroom. So here is our overall before and after. By the way, I'm zooming in and out with Command or Control minus and plus. So again, my left hand is always on the keyboard so I can work really quick, and my right hand's on my mouse. Let's see. Let me show you something different real quick. We'll get outside of. Let's get to some hair. We'll get into some flyaways here. Now this is tricky to do on occasion. It depends on your background. Here we're going to select our heal or clone tool. It's under spot removal, which is Q to get to. I'm going to use heal first. Actually, for this one, I'm going to use clone. Change my mind. The reason I'm going to use clone is because I think I can predict where Lightroom needs to sample from better than it can, which I can. So I'm going to move this around. Now, if you notice the hair is still there, you can change the size of your brush and see if that makes a difference. Actually, let me rebrush this because I wasn't, as I mentioned, this can be tricky to do in Lightroom. I'm going to paint this right over the hair. It keeps taking from that one spot. that really doesn't look that bad. That's a pretty big difference. And if you want to switch from heal to clone, you can swap around, see which one looks better and which one blends better. I'm going to go with clone. How riveting is this? I feel like teaching Lightroom is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it is necessary. So I'm just going over the parts that need changed, and I'm picking the areas to sample from because Lightroom is doing a pretty bad job of it. And there we go. So if you need to go back over another spot, you can. So we'll click done and check out the before and after here. Let me open this back up. Before and after, just with the hair. So if you have Lightroom 4.5, don't be afraid to use this spot removal tool up here. It can take a little bit of practice to understand how it's going to work, but it can be hugely beneficial. So one other trick that you can do with or without the Lightroom Retouching Toolkit is add a tilt shift effect. So if we come in here, there's two options. One, we're going to come up here. Actually, this is your only option to get to the graduated filters menu to do this tilt shift effect. But you can press M, or you can come right here to this little icon, which brings up this menu. Okay, if you want to do a tilt shift effect, turn your sharpness all the way down and turn your clarity down to around minus 60, somewhere in there. And you're going to see that your cursor is now a little crosshair. I'm going to drag this from the corner. By the way, I need to make one other adjustment. You'll notice, maybe you can't see this, but my exposure is at 0.5, which I didn't mean to change. My shot, it's because I didn't press new on the brush. So I'm going to actually double click on exposure and double click on the word shadows, and that's how you get things back to 0. So if I had my exposure on 2.8 for some reason, I can just double click the word exposure to bring it back, which is much faster than messing with those sliders. So I'm going to delete this and do this one more time for you. Watch how this blurs this side. Once again, I got to get rid of my exposure and highlights. I'm going to press new, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And get rid of those again. If you're an LRT user, I would recommend using our soften brush, which is at the very bottom for these. Then you're not going to have those same little issues I just had. But we'll just paint this or pull this over again. If you want to change the gradation, so it's going to be at strongest to this line in the center, and then it's going to start to fade out to this line. You can grab the second line, and you can actually slide these around so we can pull this back. The closer these two lines are together, the faster it's going to go from blur to in focus. So that all comes down to personal preference and the effect that you want on your image. And if you want to delete any of these, you can select the pins and just delete them in case you've gotten a little carried away like I might have. So here is our before and after. Kind of a cool tilt shift effect. The more you mess with these, the more drastic it'll be, and I recommend definitely pulling those in closer to each other and then dragging them out. But my computer keeps making a new one. So always drag it from the pin. That's the tip. Sorry, guys. I'm also going to try one other thing, which I normally have a preset made for, and I'm going to try to do it without one. And that is bringing in a fill, so or a sun flare rather. So I'm going to go to temp or white balance if you're an LRT user, and I'm first of all just going to drag this down from the top And again, it's going to be at its strongest to this line, and then it's going to start to fade. So I'm bringing that down just a little bit onto her head because it's not really going to show up too much. I may even bring one in from the side too. Okay, and you can make adjustments to this if you don't really want the warmth. What I like to do is just raise the exposure and the shadows, and you can drag this out even more. But that's going to give kind of a sun flare effect, and you can adjust that as you see fit. I just looked at the clock and realized I've been talking for 48 minutes, so I'm going to try to jump to maybe one or two other images here real quick, and then we'll open it up to questions. And if we have any questions right now while I'm looking, this wouldn't be a bad time to ask. Throw me a freaking bone here. Oh, one other kind of cool trick. Right before you, file not found. Before you interrupt here, sorry, let me show one other cool thing that you can do with your exposure brush and your brighten brush. So we've got this image here. First off, it was a fisheye lens, so we've got a little bit of the light stand in there. I'm going to select that same clone or heal tool and make it a little bit bigger and just paint off this corner basically and move this around to replace that. Okay, so now my OCD will allow me to continue. Now, this guy's got a lot of definition, but if you want to bring out the definition even more in somebody's skin or in their clothing, there's one little tip you can use that's kind of cool. So I'm gonna come in here to the brushes, select brighten. Again, you can select exposure if you want. But what I'm going to do is actually paint over the areas that already have highlights. I'm going to lower my flow down to 80. But I'm going to paint over each of these little spots. And it's going to look a little weird at first. Let me delete that. It was a little bit too strong. I'm just going to take my flow down to 70-ish. Okay, so I'm painting and painting and painting. And I'm trying to just keep it right on the edge of where there is contrast. Okay, so all these areas that are light, I'm making a little bit lighter. And in a second, any area that's dark, I'm actually going to make darker. And then this guy is going to look even more ripped than he already is. Funny story about this picture while I'm doing this, though. This kid, he knew we were going to take a track picture. I had everything set up. I knew where we were going to take the picture before we got there. And we're going out there at sunset, and he's like, do I need my track uniform? Yeah, you're going to probably need your track uniform. This isn't the Greek Olympics, and you're not running naked. So we had to go to his house, get the uniform. We got back. It had gotten darker. He then asked me if he needed his shoes. Yes, he needed shoes, so we had to go back, get the shoes, and we came back, and it was already kind of dark. Now, one tip with working with off-camera flash without getting into too much stuff, I was able to shoot with about the same settings, but the sky was really, really dark. If you're ever shooting with off-camera flash at sunset, the best way to try and balance out your flash with the sky as it changes is to open up your shutter speed. Drag it a little bit, and that's going to enhance the ambient light. It's going to let more in, and that's what allowed me to get this color out of the sky, even though it was pretty much black when I took the shot originally. Okay, so I would do the same thing with our darken. I'm just going to go over all these parts that are a little bit darker, that are right next to areas that are bright. So all we're doing is really manually making the contrast more exaggerated. And then when I go in and run our sharpener, it's going to look even more crazy. So we'll go to sharpen. I'm going to pretty much paint this over all of him. Turn my flow back up. All of him, all this ground. And here's our before and after, and watch his muscles just kind of pump up. And you can be as detailed as you want with that, but it's kind of a cool effect. You'll also notice too that his arms and his face are kind of a different color and we have a white balance warmer and cooler brush specifically for fixing things like that, because there are times when people are just going to be more tan or you know, whatever it might be. There might be some discrepancies in your light. And again, I'm going to change the white balance just a little bit to balance it out with the arms. And there's our, basically our final image. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. I appreciate you guys hanging in here. I was actually worried I was going to be done too soon, but we got done. I could keep going for hours probably.
So, I wanted to let you know that Landon Day sent his smiley face in through the question, and there have been a lot of thanks sent in to you for your support of Operation Smile, and just thanks for creating this in general.
That's amazing. I mean, seriously, thank you guys. I'm just thankful to even have the opportunity, and still blown away that anybody even cares about anything I'm doing. So, I mean, I'm just thankful for you guys and appreciative for the opportunity to make products that make your workflow faster.
Okay, just as a general comment, because I've seen this question pop up a couple of times, we did record today's webinar, and it will be available for replay on the YouTube channel once we can get it edited. It usually takes us till about the end of the week to get it up, but it will be available for everybody who is here, and even if you just registered, you will get an email when it's available, and you'll be able to watch the whole thing. So, on to the actual questions. Let's start with Jake's question. He loves the landscape trick that you showed at the very beginning, and he wanted to know if there was a way to automate it or create a preset.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of went through that briefly. I'll just show really quick again because I did show that. So we'll come down here. Profile. Now this is actually taken on a Nikon camera, so you'll want to grab a different landscape for that, or whatever settings you like. I mean, depending on your camera, go through, find what you like. Also make sure the camera calibration is on 2012, which is the current setting. The only issue we've really had with anybody that's purchased the Retoucher is that they've gotten excited to use images that they worked on a long time ago that had a different camera calibration, and if that's on like an older version, the brushes won't work quite as strongly. So if that's you, I mean that's like 1 in 100 people that we've talked to, but just reset your image or change the camera calibration when you get started. But back to what I was saying, let me grab one of my own images which has the landscape. So this is more of a, this would be more for Canon users, so I apologize for that, but you have even more options as a Nikon user. So I'm coming down here, selecting landscape, blue primary I went up to +14, reds I went down to -13, and then you've got your vignette that I added to. You can click preset, which you have your presets right up here. I click plus right next to that, select each of the things that we've actually adjusted, which again this will be recorded so you can go back for that. Name it what you want. Once you've done that, you'll click create, not cancel, and then go to library, and you can set this to where your images will import with that setting. So I'll click import, and then once I would have selected my pictures, I would come over here to apply during import, develop settings, user presets, and then I named that Auto Magic. You can name it whatever you want, or for whatever preset you may want to use on import, you can set it up to do that. And that's going to save you a lot of time if you find yourself consistently using the exact same preset on all your images. Just have it run on import, and it's going to speed up your workflow even more.
Okay, next question comes from Travis. How does the effects brushes affect subjects of color, brown, yellow, and darker skin tones?
That's an excellent question. I actually live in the most, we have no cultural diversity here. It's honestly really frustrating. There's about 5,000 people in the town I live in Illinois, so I don't have personally a lot of images to draw from. We have had people ask that question, and I've just encouraged them to buy it and try it out. and if they don't like it, there's a money-back guarantee. I'm not really concerned about it. I've yet to have anybody take me up on that for that reason. So here's an Asian person, and we can edit her, and it's basically the same thing. So the way these work is less about color and more about texture. So it's working with the skin to smooth it out. I would say with people of color, in my experience, you're going to often have like their skin get darker because that's just sort of the nature of optics. You know, you're trying to balance your exposure, and their tonality may be darker than that of someone with lighter skin, which actually plays into the way the retoucher works, because we do a little bit to raise the shadows, and it's just going to work. I would say it's just going to work. Now, again, please try it out. Please send me images of before and afters. I'd love to put them on the website. I'm always looking for more images. But it's going to work based on texture, not color so much.
All right, this one's coming from Katie, and she'd like to know, how does your beauty brush differ from the smooth skin brush that's automatically in Lightroom?
That is an awesome question. Thank you so much, Katie. I would love to explain why our brushes are so much better. The brushes that come with Lightroom are just really, really basic. So I know there's a skin smoothing brush that some of you guys will have that came with Lightroom. I believe what they do is they just turn the sharpness all the way down. So what you're doing is just essentially blurring the skin. With our beauty brush, there's a lot of things going on. And I talked about earlier how I like to make my edits a culmination of smaller effects, because with smaller effects, as they add up, the result is more realistic than making one big drastic effect, as Adobe's Skin Smoother, which is either a drop in clarity or sharpness completely. I have ours pulled up. We lower the sharpness some, we lower the clarity some, we raise the highlights a little bit. We bring the highlights down because that's typically where you're going to get shiny skin. We bring the shadows up a little bit. We lower the contrast a little bit because those two things, contrast and shadow, are what make blemishes appear more drastic because a shadow is being created. So ours work as a culmination of things, or a combination of things that will give you a more realistic result in the end than just dropping your clarity or dropping your sharpness. Essentially at the core of it, I've just spent way more time than anybody else has to make brushes like this, especially these ones that come with Lightroom.
All right, now we're going to slide over to Tracy, who asks, instead of using the drop-down arrows to access the brushes, is there a way to assign a function key to the brush?
Oh, Tracy, I wish there was, but unfortunately there isn't yet in Lightroom a way to have hotkeys to get into these. The only way that I could really do anything about that was just try to put them in the most simple, easy to find order and have them named for exactly what they do. So that way you can just jump straight into the brush you need really quickly and find it. So once you've used this a little bit, you get an idea for it. Everything is in alphabetical order, like as far as adjustment, beauty brush, color enhance, color reduce, eyeshadow, eyes, hair, lips, etc. And what else is really cool about this brush set is I just talked about it for 48 minutes, but there's probably 25 brushes I didn't even get a chance to show off. So if there's anything you want to do with a brush in Lightroom, it's in here. I've already made it for you. Even if it's something kind of on the fringe that you're not going to need very often, like adding catch lights, there's a brush specifically for that. So no, until Lightroom comes out with hotkeys like that, there's not a fast way to change your brush from this drop-down menu, but you can press K to get into that. I just uploaded it to my blog. I don't know exactly where on my, oh, here we go. Maybe this is it. I loaded these to our website today. So these are essential hotkey guides. It's going to open in Photoshop. But these are on our website. If you go to lightroomretouching.com and click blog, it's the second blog post down. You can just right-click and save these hotkeys. And I would recommend just printing them out or having them up on your screen while you're working, because then you can see some quick tips and tricks hotkey wise for Lightroom, and as soon as my Photoshop fires up, I'll show you exactly what they look like so you can decide if you want to go to our website. One second. Let's get the next question, and I'll pull those up here in just a minute.
Okay, this one's going to be from Leanna. She doesn't see any of the presets, or rather she doesn't see all of the presets. Have you created all of the presets you use, or did you get some from another area?
So all of the presets, if she's only seen these up here, that's because those are what come with Lightroom, and then these other brushes here, in case she joined us late, those are all the actual Lightroom Retouching Toolkit brushes. So I created those. The Lightroom Retouching Toolkit works within Lightroom. It works as part of Lightroom, and it's in here with all of your other brushes, so you don't have to go and open up Photoshop to run that program. The way to further explain what these brushes really are, it's sort of a preset in the sense that the settings are preset by me to give you the most consistent results possible. But here's this Hotkeys guide. If you go to lightroomretouching.com, here's the website, and click blog and go down, you'll find this. And there's some stuff on here that's going to help really speed up your workflow. And one other, while we're talking about hotkeys, one other really useful hotkey is when you're painting. So let me reset this image really fast, and I'm going to take down the white balance a little bit, and I'm going to use our beauty brush. When you're painting something on, let's say you accidentally messed up and we went over her eyeball. If you want to erase, you can just hold Alt or Option and paint that off the area you want. Now you'll have to pay attention to your flow and your feather and everything. Make sure your flow is 100% if you want to completely remove it. But that way you don't have to come over here, click Erase, come back over. You can just hold that Option or Alt key on your keyboard, and you'll see it change from plus to minus.
Okay, this is going to be a two-parter from Jared. First part is when you're using the adjustment brushes, for example, the lip gloss brush, and you think it's a little bit too strong, do you adjust the density and or the flow?
Yeah, so actually, let me go ahead and hop over on the lip gloss. Now, most of these I tried to set these up to where you're not going to need to adjust the density or the flow too often, but of course, there's going to be times when you do, depending on the image. So I'm going to paint this on here. If you feel like it's not enough, then you can click New and add a new one. If you feel like it's too much, there's two ways to go about it. You can either erase part of it. So if you notice over here, when I hold Alt, and again, it's going to switch from paint to erase. If I change my density to like 50%, what that allows me to do is when I switch over here to erase, it's only going to take off a certain amount, and I can kind of just keep going back over it as I see fit to get rid of as much as I want. That way you don't have to delete and start over at like 50% density painting it on. It just makes it a little bit easier. I hope that's clear enough. In my head it's totally clear, but it doesn't always work in translation, I guess.
Okay, second half of Jared's question is, would you use the spray tan brush on all over the skin of the person, or do you just tend to use it very sparingly?
Yeah, that's definitely one of those brushes that is more sparing in nature. It's more for extreme cases of balancing things out. There's probably times when you could use it on somebody's entire skin, but I haven't been doing that very often personally, and that's just based on the images I've had to work with. Like on an image like this, I would probably use it, and again, I'm going to make sure my feather is turned up all the way. That's something you're just going to want to start checking as you go. One other quick tip, if you prefer to work with the flow, you can press any one of your number keys. 8 will take you to 80%, 70, 70, etc. 0 is 100. And also, anytime you're working with the Lightroom Retouching Toolkit, leave the auto mask thing off. I really think that the results that auto mask give are kind of inconsistent. That's when Lightroom is trying to guess where the edges of things are at, and it basically doesn't apply the brush in that area. That's my understanding of it. So I'd really recommend leaving that off. We haven't had very consistent results. But with this spray tan, I would use it in areas like this, like the back of her hand was really white. So I'm just painting that spray tan in that area to balance it out. And it's really more for just finding balance.
Okay, this one's from Mitesh. Another opinion. Would you have your screen calibrated before using Lightroom?
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to want to have your screen calibrated no matter what program you're using. And the reason for that is when you get a print, you're going to want that print to look exactly like what you see on your screen. When I started out, I really had no idea what camera calibration or screen calibration was, and I would send my pictures to the lab and I would get so mad because they looked terrible and they were overexposed. And the reason they were overexposed is because my monitor was actually way too dark, which meant when I was editing, to make it look right on my monitor, I was making the image overly bright, so when I sent it to the lab, then it was overexposed to begin with, and they printed it as it was. So as far as camera calibration goes, there's some different tools out there. I've never actually had good success with them. I just eyeball it. I'll take a print and I'll just eyeball it. I mean, that's certainly not the most professional thing to tell you, but that's what's worked for me, and I guess I have good eyes. Some people like the spider, I think it's just called the spider camera calibration thing. And if you use something that you like, please put it in the comments, and we'll let people know, because camera, that's not my area of expertise. I did want to say, though, for sure, if you guys are interested in more Lightroom education, I wouldn't consider myself a great Lightroom teacher. I'm just good at figuring out what I want to be able to do for myself and to make a product that works for everybody else. If you want more information on Lightroom, check out Jared Platt's Creative Live classes, because he is phenomenal. Like, that guy knows everything about Lightroom. I actually paid for him yesterday. I have my assistant watching those classes so we can better help you guys answer questions in Lightroom, because we're just trying to grow and learn too. So yeah, Jared Platt on Creative Live. I would absolutely check his stuff out.
Hey, Brett, how do you spell his last name?
P-L-A-T-T.
Had a couple of people wanting to know what that last name was.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's awesome.
Also, despite our conversation before we got things started today, I have several people asking where they can find these brushes, so why don't you let them know?
Okay. I don't know. I hate doing sales, so I apologize that I'm not even telling you guys how you can buy this. You can go to lightroomretouching.com and pick these up. There's some more stuff on there, some before and afters. It is 48 brushes. It works for Lightroom 4 and 5. You can do so much more than just what I've showed you here. It is only $89. So that's a pretty amazing price, especially for the fact that you're not going to have to go into Photoshop anymore to do your retouching. There's some great reviews on there. I've got reviews from Blair Phillips. Vanessa Joy says this is a game changer, and then it's going to be a staple of everyone's workflow. Hiram Trio, who is listening to this and is a WPPI Grand Award winner, is using this thing. I know Landon in here is using it. There's so many phenomenal photographers that are using this. It's completely mind-blowing to me and humbling. And yeah, it's also a money-back guarantee. So check it out. Put it up against your retoucher. If it doesn't find a home for your workflow or your workflow, let me know. And again, I'm not really too concerned about that. I haven't had any emails coming in about it. So yeah, lightroomretouching.com. And if you go to the blog, you can find that little hotkeys guide as well.
Let's see. Kaya Marie asked, were you using a graduated filter to add the sun flare effect?
Yeah, I was using the graduated filter to do the tilt shift effect. You could do that with the brushes, I suppose. So let me actually, now I used our blur settings on that, but let me pull up another image and we'll do this really quick. So I'm going to come up here to our brushes and go to soften. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to turn the sharpness all the way down, turn the clarity down some, and I'm just going to paint this over the sides just like you would a tilt shift effect wherever you'd want it. So here's the before and after, and that was actually a lot quicker than the other way I did it. But You can do that whether you have our brushes or not. Just turn your sharpness down basically all the way, turn your clarity down some, and you'll get that buttery look. And you can always hit new and do it even more on the edges if you want to get even more of that effect.
Okay, question from Amy now is she's using spot remover in Lightroom 4 and can't seem to get her circle to drag and expand its area like you are. Is that something with Lightroom 4 or something else?
Yes, I think that's specific to Lightroom 4. I'm not sure if you can just expand that area out beforehand and maybe try swapping from clone to heal and see. I really can't. I'm using Lightroom 5, and my experience in Lightroom 4 is somewhat limited, so I'm not entirely sure. But I know in Lightroom 5 you can move that thing around a lot easier. They've made some improvements. One other thing I wanted to mention too, for anybody on maybe Lightroom 4 or above, I would recommend checking out the Creative Cloud. You can do a 1-month trial of it. It's 30 days, and you can try, I believe, any one of the Photoshop products or Lightroom products, and Lightroom 5 is included in that. So if you want to give Lightroom 5 a try, especially if you're on 3 or before, I would absolutely recommend it, because I didn't even like Lightroom 2 or 3. I didn't find them useful for me, and now my entire workflow is contained in Lightroom, and especially because of the Lightroom Retouching Toolkit, because I have access to those brushes that I normally had to go into Photoshop to do those things with.
Okay, this one comes from Diana. First she says, thank you, and you rock, in all caps.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she has...
Well, she rocks, for the record, but go ahead.
Her brushes say LCA and not LRT. Are those the same?
Yeah, they are actually the same. So when I started this company, it was Life Camera Action's Lightroom Retouching Toolkit. It was a product within that company. The brushes she has are exactly the same, except the first letters they used to be LCA for Life Camera Actions, and now they're LRT for Lightroom Retouching Toolkit, because it's its own brand. But when I did the beta release, and my entire point with doing the beta release was to get user feedback, specifically negative feedback of what I could change, and nobody got back to me. Like I asked 3 times, and nobody seemed to have any issues at all. So they are still the same, just the name has changed basically.
All right, this one's a bit of speculation. Do you think these will carry over if Lightroom 6 ever comes out?
Man, I love these. The questions you guys are asking are great, because these are all things I meant to address, but I completely forgot. Yeah, I really do think they'll carry over just fine. And if they don't, upgrades are going to be free from us forever. So if you buy it right now, they come out with Lightroom 6 and something changes, or we have the opportunity to make the brushes more robust in Lightroom 6, that update's going to be free, and it's going to be automatically sent to like your account, so you'll get an email download when that. If that ever happens. Hopefully, the way they've been doing things like that, because I've been developing editing software now since 2010, and it's only affected what we do one time, and I don't think they're going to do that anymore to make a change that affects products that work within, especially because of the way ours work. They're not like a plug-in that has to be rewritten for different coding. They are a brush, and they work as a Lightroom local adjustment file. So those are going to carry over from one version to the next. And that's all I have to say about that. Anything else?
Yes, we have a request from Lynn to see an example of how the eyeliner brush would be used.
Oh, cool. Okay, let me pull something up. I mean, I can show you, and you'll get the idea all the same. So let me brighten this shot up. We also have you go up here. Again, I can press K to get to that menu if I want. And I'll go down to eyes, eyeliner, and zoom in. And this is really great if you just want to add a little bit of that eyeliner accent. You can see how it just kind of darkens that one area. And you can paint it in however you want it. I've never applied eyeliner to myself before, so I guess I'm doing this right. I think it just goes right here. But yeah, and you can add a second layer if you'd like. It's really meant to kind of enhance what's already there. But yeah, so that's that. Another little tip with eyes. So first off, I'm just going to go ahead and run our eyes green brush, and I'll paint this right over her eyes. When eyes look their best, they're kind of categorized by this bright in the center and dark on the edge. So that's why I only go over the pupils for the most part, because that keeps that part a little bit darker. If you want to enhance that even more, you can go to darken. This might be too dark, but you can just go around that rim of the eyes, and that really just ups the contrast in the eyes and makes them pop. So just our little change to the eyes there by adding that eyeliner kind of further defined where her eye was at. The green really makes it pop. And then my OCD is getting the best of me, so I need to go in here and go to eyes, remove bags, and just paint that off. We have a scar removal brush as well, or scar reduction brush actually, but this remove bags brush works on just about any area that is darker than what surrounds it. And then we could just go to the beauty brush and paint this off the rest of the skin. Now with a big scar like that, I'd probably use like the heal tool or the clone tool, but just to give you an example of how to use that bags removal brush. We also have a teeth whitening brush. Again, anything that you want is in here, so that's under teeth, whiten.
Okay, this one might be a bit of a technical question. Victor can only get 14 brushes. He can see all of them in the folder, but he can't get them to show in Lightroom.
Okay, let's see. Victor, just shoot me an email, because that's something that we're just going to have to probably diagnose. It just means you probably didn't get everything copied in there properly, or maybe when you selected the brushes you didn't get all of them picked, or whatever it might be. So send me an email. And you guys can send me an email with any questions at all. It's brett@jarnaginphotography.com, and I'll pull up Lightroom or Photoshop and type that really quick so you have it, because I didn't make a page of where you can find me. But I answer 100% of the customer support emails, and I run all of our social media pages and all that stuff. So I'm super accessible, and I always try to help. If I can't find an answer, even if it's not for a product of mine, I try to figure it out. So my email is brett@jarnaginphotography.com. Make that a little bit bigger. And you can find me on Facebook. You can go ahead with another question if you want.
That was actually the last one. If you're viewing the chat, please pay attention to the way that Brett spells his last name, not the way I do, as I reverse the last A and I.
It happens. My only goal in life is for people to spell my name right, but I'm slowly getting better at that. So it's brett@jarnaginphotography.com, and I'm at Brett Jarnagin on everything else. Well, thank you guys so much. Cool. Well, we fielded all questions, and I was super nervous about this. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope it was beneficial to you, and I hope the Lightroom Retouching Toolkit can really speed up your workflow so you can quit going into Photoshop and keep your workflow contained within Lightroom, which is ultimately just, I feel, a more efficient process for Lightroom users.
As Brett said, thanks everybody for the questions. Thank you, Brett, for taking time and doing the presentation today, and for going so far over, getting all those questions answered. Just a final reminder, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be posted on the PhotoBiz YouTube page at youtube.com/PhotoBiz. Be sure to check out our blog and watch your email for updates about future webinars. Next week we will not be having a webinar. Next week we will be releasing the second in our Biz Talk series, when I will be covering blogging strategies that work. We'll be looking at how to get more engagement and better search engine optimization out of your blog post. The following week, April 2nd, we will feature a presentation from Jeff Shaw, who is a photographer and a business coach. Thank you again, Brett. That concludes today's episode of PhotoBiz Live. Have a great day, everyone.